and we're going to go ahead and get started laying the framework for our conversations today. So I am so delighted to be here. My name is Dr. Nika White, and I serve as the principal of Nika White Consulting, a management consulting firm that's based in Greenville, South Carolina, where we intersect the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion with leadership in business. And we're so excited to bring this weekly virtual community chat to this community. And we call it Intentional Conversations because we are very deliberate about the guest co-hosts that we bring on. And we want to make sure we're having fruitful conversations that allows all of us as a community that cares about diversity, equity, and inclusion to emerge stronger. So I'm going to take you through a couple slides. This next one is really just to invite you to connect with us. I am on all different social media platforms. I'm on Twitter at Nika White, Facebook, Nika White Consulting, and we're live right now, by the way, and so welcome to our Facebook Live audience. I also invite you to follow us on Instagram at Nika C. White, and then LinkedIn at Dr. Nika White. We want to continue the conversation, so feel free to leverage all of those platforms. I also want to invite you to visit our website at your leisure, which is nikawhite.com. We offer lots of great information as courtesy for those who are looking to increase their leadership around diversity, equity, and inclusion, such as white papers and blogs. We do short videos every week that we release called Inclusion Uncomplicated, Simplify DEI. And we encourage you to take a look at that, as well as you can get all past replays of Intentional Conversations, virtual community chats. In addition to, that's where you can register for upcoming chats as well. This is an opportunity for me to share who our guest co-host is going to be for the next week. And so I'm so excited because I get to welcome my friend, Jeremiah Dew. Many of you that are in this local market, you know him as Jay Dew. But he's going to be with us as my co-host on July 31st. And we're going to be covering lots of great topics, particularly the work that he does around African-American history. And we're going to talk about some of those incredible historians and what they've done to really forge ahead so many great opportunities for the Black individuals. And so I really do appreciate him being with us this week. And then the following week, I have the pleasure of welcoming my friend, Victoria Russell, who is the Chief Diversity Officer of Papa John's in Louisville, Kentucky. And we're going to be exchanging information, particularly around women of color in corporate America. But we also want to hear about how Papa John's is navigating the global pandemic and the racial crisis. So let's get into why we are here today. Again, this is called Intentional Conversations. Welcome, everyone. I want to just set the tone for what we are endeavoring to do throughout our time together today. We are really committed to making this an environment where we can optimize the experience for all. And so with that in mind, I'm going to share just a couple considerations that I ask each of you to partner with us on and keep it top of mind throughout our time together as we hold space for each other. The first is, when you're not sharing, please remain on mute to avoid background noise disruption. If you're comfortable, turn those cameras on. We'd love to see your smiling faces, but if not, we're glad that you're participating in whatever capacity that's comfortable for you. We are here in a sense of community. And so in that regard, we are learning with and from each other. And there will be opportunities where we will invite you to unmute yourself to share your questions, your thoughts with this community. And although our topics are going to vary, and they do so week to week based upon who our guest co-host is, this is all about intersecting diversity, equity, and inclusion, leadership, and business. So we'll be combining all of those topics. We, of course, are very much respectful of what's top of mind for each of us as we continue to navigate the complexity of the global pandemic amidst the racial injustice inequities that we are experiencing and that we continue to find ways to dismantle. We also want to make sure that this is a time where we are providing a path to action rather than just simply sharing information and knowledge transfer. So if you have any resources, books, articles, anything that you feel like this community could benefit from, certainly feel free to use that chat feature to share it there. So this is dynamic knowledge, and we appreciate you allowing us to lean on you for contributing generously to this community. These sessions are being recorded, and this afternoon you will receive an actual email that will be a follow-up that will include some of the takeaways from today's session, as well as the recording for playback and the chat transcript. So that's why those resources are important for you to share. Now, it does me great pleasure to introduce my special co-host for today. I'm so excited to have Michael Williams He's known as Mike. I call him Mike. All of you can call him Mike. I'm sure he'll tell you the same thing. But Mike received his BS degree in operations research from the United States Military Academy at West Point and has a passion for mentoring, serving his community, and helping others to achieve their potential. Mike's extensive experiences in talent acquisition, diversity, equity, and inclusion, human resources, industrial engineering, supply chain management, learning and development, and operations research. Mike currently serves as the Director of Recruiting and the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at Michelin North America. So now we're going to switch from sharing our screen so we can bring Mike up full and center. And Mike, we are so excited to have you here today. Thank you kindly for being generous with your time to be my guest co-host. So I just want to give you a chance to greet this audience.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nika. I just want to say good morning to everyone. It really gives me a lot of just pride to have the opportunity to speak with this audience. A lot of the work that we're doing here at Michelin and in the work that I take on personally as part of my role, it just makes me feel good about what we're doing. And, you know, when you're speaking and talking with colleagues in the same space, there's so much to be learned from each other. And that's one of the things that I seek. I'm a life runner. I want to make sure I hear back from you all as well, your comments and thoughts on subjects. But again, I just appreciate the forum, this opportunity to speak to the group.
Awesome. And we're very grateful for you and your willingness to share with us today. So for those of you on the call, Mike and I have bonded over so many different things, not only the space of diversity, equity, and inclusion and our love for mentoring and service to our community, but we also share the same birthday, June 3rd. And so oftentimes when we connect, he says, "Hey, twin, what's up?" And so I respond back fondly as well. And so we do share that. So let's jump right in, because I know there's a lot that we want to share with this community. One frustration, Mike, that I have heard from many corporate leaders is the pressure to move so fast around addressing what's happening right now with systemic racism and the racial inequity crisis. And the need and the feeling to move so fast is causing some to feel as though there is a potential to diminish the ability to build a very thoughtful plan that can be activated with meaning and effectiveness. So I want you to speak to how quickly was Michelin able to activate? And did you feel any pressure to move faster, perhaps, than what you were ready for at the time?
That was a great question, Nika. I think we were, if I reflect back on the events that happened for us on Labor Day and the response that we've had since then, I feel like we responded fairly quickly. Mm-hmm. There obviously was a lot of pressure from a lot of people of color, African Americans, to do something. And, you know, during that time, the first few days, there was just a complete silence. And it was like, you know, something is about to occur, and we need to do something now. And if I could just go right into the story, you know, for me, it did take a moment, even for me to you know, understand what was happening across the U.S. And it was by that Friday, you know, a few days later, that I realized that in my role, just a role in diversity and inclusion, but just my role as just a human being, I needed to do something that represented our company and to say, hey, we've got to stand up and be a voice. And that started with a conversation that happened on that Friday night. Before you know it, there was a conversation with more people on Saturday, again on Sunday, and then we kind of issued our initial statement in regards to it. And it kind of grew from there. But there certainly was just an incredible amount of like, why aren't we saying anything? What's going on? You know, and people needed to hear from the leadership of the company. And we were, you know, I would say, I would not say that we were late to the party, but I think we needed to be very thoughtful because there are so many people. You know, we have 20,000 people here in North America that look to us for leadership, and we need to be very thoughtful about how we state those messages. Maybe not everybody agrees with what was going on, and we wanted to take, you know, be considerate of that as well. But we knew that, you know, this is about, you know, our company mission is about sustainable mobility. But the issue that we're dealing with right now is just about human sustainability. So regardless, we had a role to play in making that known.
No, absolutely. And so I'm curious to hear a little bit more about those initial internal conversations before you then started activating with some very incredible initiatives that I know you're going to share with us today. So what was that conversation like, and how did you get from that very influential, powerful conversation to lead towards the actions that are now your organization is benefiting from? And of course, describe those actions for us.
Well, if anyone knows our company, we're not necessarily way out there in terms of social issues, and we're proud of who we are, but we're probably not the Nikes of the world who really build part of their brand on inserting themselves into social issues, and so those initial conversations were really, okay, we've got to kind of step up our game, so to speak. We need to make a statement. And once we got our communications team involved in how to respond, I think it was then real easy for us to make those statements. And again, we probably looked at it internally initially. Once we evolved and said, look, here, let's look at all these other companies who are making, some very bold statements about this subject. We were finally able to, convince that, well, it actually didn't take any convincing. Our top leadership knew and recognized that we had to make some statements. And so we actually made 2 or 3 statements internally, and then externally on I guess it was June 15th, we made a very strong statement externally that was, again, went across all media outlets, and we got a lot of great support from our global headquarters in France about us dealing with this here in North America. So I think, again, if you look at the pressures that were being put on us, I think we responded quite well in a timely manner.
No, that's awesome. And then that is what, after the communications went out, that is then where you began to realize, really it was prior to this, that it's not enough just to make a statement. We need to follow this up with action, and not just any action, but action that can be sustainable, that can be meaningful and effective. And so you talk about this RISE squared, I believe I'm getting it right. I want you to kind of walk us through what that whole initiative looked like and what it entails and involves, because I think that many in this community can gain a lot of value from the best practice, and I do call it best practice very intentionally, that Michelin has been able to implement as the employees are navigating the complexities of this time.
Yes. So RISE, our RISE initiative, RISE Square as we call it, responding to racism, inequality, and injustice through sustainable social empowerment and engagement. And it really began, if I could take a moment to step back.
Please.
So we became very, matter of fact, on my birthday, we started.
On our birthday.
Yeah, our birthday, my birthday. My wife was, looking forward to me spending some good quality time on that day with her. But instead, I was kind of I was here at work leading an effort that I think became monumental for us. We typically have a 1-hour call with our HR team across the whole region every Wednesday morning. And it was that day on my birthday that I felt compelled that I needed to share my own personal story. And that story was related to things that happened to me with law enforcement. So obviously the George Floyd thing just kind of created a lot of emotion and reaction for me. And I'll just share a little bit of that story with this group. Approximately, 2001, I was driving I was living in Dothan, Alabama at the time, working for Michelin. I was driving down to Destin, Florida to have a nice weekend, nice evening. And I got pulled over, just to get a framework. It was, like about 6:30 in the afternoon and the evening. And there had been kind of a thunderstorm. And so it was a little bit dusk, getting a little bit darker than normal. And so I happened to be driving with my fog lights on instead of the driving lights. but it wasn't nighttime yet. So I wasn't speeding. Officer pulled me over. And of course, I asked the question of, officer, what are you pulling me over for? And knowing I wasn't speeding or anything like that, hadn't made any violation. And he said again, license and registration. So okay, all right. So as I was reaching to get my wallet to give him my license, he pulled his revolver, pulled his service weapon, and put it right next to my head. You can imagine the feel of having a loaded weapon right next to your head. And of course, I froze. I stopped reaching, and just alerted the officer, hey, I'm just reaching to get my wallet. And it kind of, from there, it didn't turn into anything. But still, that reflection for me to know that that barrel of that gun was, inches from my head, left me with a certain impression. And I've learned from it since of what to do, what not to do. But it then led to other events that have happened in my life that, unfortunately have been involved with law enforcement, that makes me question, whether these things were done to me because of my race. And I won't go into those because and I, quite frankly, and I do want to say that, my stories are not about, minimizing the work and effort that the police officers do, because law enforcement have a tremendous job to do on a daily basis. But the way it related to me, it led me to eventually being able to, when I got put over since, I rolled down every window. I put my hands outside the vehicle to let the officer know that I am no threat. But that's the kind of the feeling that I live with, and many other people of color live with when being approached by law enforcement. So that's the story that I shared, and the feedback that I got was just overwhelming, to the point where we next then shared. I got opportunity to share that story with approximately 3,000 more colleagues the next day, and then the following day we actually created, within a short period of time, created some sessions that I entitled "Caring for One Another." I was able to get several of my other colleagues to share their personal stories, as well as allies to share how they've been supportive of African Americans, professionally and personally. And so that immediately following that session, which became just such a heartwarming expression, we formed this RISE team. And from there, we really launched into some strategic actions that we needed to take. Again, the name became RISE, Responding to Racism, Inequality, and Injustice through Sustainable Social Empowerment Engagement. We're really working really hard on creating some training programs that we have launched. Been very strategic about action that we need to take to be more inclusive, particularly of African Americans, but not only that, but all people of color and gender as well. So it has evolved to be a very action-oriented, very quick response, and I'm just very proud of the organization. We have all our leaders who are fully involved. I'll pause there for any other thoughts or questions from you, Nika.
No, I appreciate, first and foremost, Mike, your generosity of sharing your personal story. For those that have been following our intentional conversations, they know that I often talk about the importance of us being willing to share our stories, especially if we feel like we have the emotional capital to give to sharing our stories. That's not always the case, because it helps others to get proximate to the lived experiences, particularly of people of color. and how in which they are impacted by racism. And so I appreciate you leaning into your vulnerability and sharing that with this audience. You're actually getting some love in the chat for doing so. And I can imagine that sharing your story, here you are an executive with Michelin North America, 20,000 employees. And as an executive, when you share your personal story, I think that for some people who may come from a place of privilege and have never experienced something of that nature, it makes it more real for them. And I think that that leads people to feeling called to action in some type of capacity, which is what we want. We want people to not feel as though they can't play a part in dismantling systemic racism. And so I just want to share appreciation for you making your story generously available to this community. And so I take it that the organization has seen some good benefits so far from the level of engagement around these conversations and the Rise Squared initiative. Did you have anyone within this large organization that perhaps stepped forward and said, I'm kind of not on board with this, and have you considered XYZ? Almost that contradictory type of personality that we see can creep in, even though the organization is really committed to doing the right thing. Did you have to deal with some of the naysayers, I guess, those who were not as open to this?
Yeah, a little bit. You're always going to get, what amazes me is those that say, get back to making tires. You're making this political. This is not about politics. Yeah. And those who want to make about politics, my heart goes out to them, because this is about human, right? So you had some of that. You had, and obviously this focused initially also on African Americans. And so we had to make sure that we were being inclusive to all people of color. Right. So, everybody has a different angle. And honestly, for me, I understand it. I get it. And, those saying, y'all are bashing the police. Well, no, it's not about bashing police, because, again, I have family members who are police officers. Mm-hmm. And I know what they deal with on a daily basis, and my heart goes out. But, at the same time, I'm just sharing the experience that many African Americans have lived with for a long time. I grew up in Jackson, Mississippi. Mm-hmm. And, when people think of Mississippi, they, people like, thank God for Mississippi, they're at the bottom of the list, for everything, it seems like. But, and when it comes to racial injustices, I mean, there's a lot of history there. And I can't help but be formed by the things that I grew up with and experienced and are well aware with, that, unfortunately has, law enforcement involved in it, right? And going back a ways back. So, there's that, if you would, you call it that bias, but that's my reality. And so I think, ultimately, there have been those who have, why this? But again, Nika, to your point, we said, what happened to George Floyd was someone in Minnesota that people couldn't connect with. And people want to believe, what? He probably deserved it. Well, I'm sorry, no one deserves that, okay? But when you can share a story, a related story, and it's about somebody that and that you can connect with, and you can imagine how many people, reached out to me and said, Mike, that couldn't have happened to you. You're not that kind of guy. But I'm sorry, but yes, I'm Black. and it happens to everyone. So I think what it has really done is shown a face to an issue that's going on right now, and not a face that people know. And so I was thankful to be able to have that opportunity to do so.
Well, Mike, what you're sharing gives me an opportunity to amplify the importance of when people of color are, again, leaning into their vulnerability to share their lived experiences, we must believe them. And that is one of the things that I hear oftentimes from people of color, is that they're challenged by people not believing their experiences. And again, I think it comes from a place of privilege, because it's almost as though that does not really impact me or affect me. I've never been witness to that or even come close to experiencing that. So that can't be the truth, you know? And so then what happens is for those that do decide to come forth when they're not believed, they begin to keep it to themselves and they're harboring all of that. And we know that none of us can show up at our best in any environment if we're questioning whether or not we belong, whether or not we can be believed, that we're trusted, that we're valued. And so it's so many connection points to the need for environments and organizations to be much more forward thinking around this work of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I want to shift a little bit because we are, of course, still dealing with the looming effects of the global pandemic. And I'm saying looming effects, it's actually some intense effects that are increasing by the day. So we are having even greater complexities in really trying to make sure we're managing a workforce. And so I want you to talk a little bit about Michelin's approach to navigating the complexity of the global pandemic, while at the same time, of course, like, you know, this racial injustice crisis is going on. But specifically, there's a lot of banter right now around kids returning to school in the fall. And so what is Michelin's approach to navigating that in consideration of working parents are having to make some really tough calls as schools are putting forth hybrid approach to learning? How's Michelin dealing with that?
Well, I think we actually were responding quite well. There is no cookie cutter answer for this one.
Right.
We have to navigate it as we go along. And you know, when the pandemic began, probably like many organizations, but our entire region, we have a phone call every Thursday afternoon from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock, where we really focus on how we're dealing with the pandemic. And obviously in recent, especially in recent weeks, you know, more of the subject is around, you know, returning to school and how parents are dealing with it. And keep in mind, we're a manufacturing company. So, and you know, while we stopped manufacturing in some of our facilities for, you know, a few weeks, we've gone back to, you know, to full manufacturing, to building tires. And, you know, keep in mind that, you know, many of our employees who are on the industry side, they deal with this all the time. This is their world. You know, our wage employees who rotate and you know, how do they deal with childcare and things of that nature. But obviously, you know, today's environment is a little bit different in childcare and, you know, these different things. Well, we've certainly have engaged with and created a cross-functional team of HR partners, business partners, and to say, okay, how can we modify our you know, remote work policies where applicable to accommodate you know, parents who are dealing with, you know, with childcare issues and school issues. I'd also, you know, have to, you know, mention that, you know, our safety protocols that we have in place in our facility is just, you know, top notch. So we're not having, you know, really we're not having any spread of the COVID, you know, within our facilities. But we also are make sure that we address the school issues. You know, as of note, yesterday we held a press conference right here in our main building with many leaders throughout the state of South Carolina, to include State Superintendent Molly Spearman, State Epidemiologist Linda Bell, to talk about our commitment to support, you know, this response to the pandemic. And it's very well, you know, I think we're documented the things that we're trying to partner with other agencies, looking for solutions for parents. But also, again, you know, we all have to take some personal responsibility and do the best that we can. So I think there's a good partnership that's happening right now to address the school issue during this pandemic.
No, I agree. And I was very much privy to the fact that that press conference took place yesterday. And what I remember reflecting on was, you know, Michelin being such a reputable brand and employer, particularly in the upstate, but of course, you know, you have a presence all over. I think that it shows the ability and the need for brands to be much more thoughtful about the intersection of commerce and community. You know, you said before that someone mentioned, well, you know, just go and make tires, and why are you worried about this other stuff? You know, brands and corporations cannot ignore what's happening outside of the four walls of their facility, because those elements are certainly impacting how in which their people are showing up to work and able to be productive and to perform. And so hopefully for those organizations maybe that have not been quite as thoughtful and empathetic to the plight of their employees around childcare issues and other issues. Some are taking care of elderly parents, right? That could be invulnerable health conditions. I think that Michelin is setting an example, and hopefully others are going to follow suit. So I appreciate that. I'm going to ask maybe one or two more questions, but before I get into those additional questions, I want to just remind our audience that we will be opening up the line momentarily for any of you who wish to be a part of the conversation to unmute yourself and to share. And so feel free to be thinking of those questions. So for leaders, it's really important to understand the notion of being brave, but not necessarily feeling like you have to be perfect. And I love that, because one of the things that I'm hearing right now from so many people that have been supported in meaningful ways is that the authenticity of those leaders to show up to say, I don't have all the answers, but I want to learn. And doing that, I think, allows for people to recognize that none of us really has this all figured out, you know, and we need to be okay and give ourselves permission for not having all of the answers. But during this time of uncertainty, are you seeing this type of leadership on display where there's a huge level of authenticity, but yet and still being brave enough to not sit on the sidelines, but just jump into the conversations and try to navigate the waters?
Yeah,
Share with us maybe some of the ways in you're seeing that leadership being displayed. Be brave, but not perfect.
yeah, you know, they absolutely are. And quite frankly, you know, we early on when some things were happening, you know, we did some surveys of, you know, find out from leaders, you know, are you reaching out to your employees? Are you connecting with them? Are you asking how they're doing? And you know, initially there was some who had and some who had not. And, you know, I asked the question, well, for those of you who have not, you know, what, why not?
Right.
You know, I'm not sure what to say.
Yeah.
I don't know how it may be perceived. You know, I mean, the same things that we all are dealing with, right? And you know, I had opportunity to talk with a couple of people who come to me and say, "My God, I'm not sure just what to do."
Yeah.
I said, the worst thing you do is do nothing.
Right.
You know, so we talked about being bold, being courageous, step up, and you know, I know that there's the feeling of, man, if I say it the wrong way, it come off the wrong way, and quite frankly, we have to be conscious of that. You right? I mean, you can have the best of intentions, and you can have a conversation that can go off the rails quick.
Right.
So there's a skill with being able to facilitate that. But what I'm loving that I'm seeing is that more and more managers and leaders in our company are stepping right in and saying, okay, let's figure this out together. Right? Let's be a part of a solution. We're not sure exactly what the solution is, but let's keep the conversation going. And so a lot of discussion has been about, you know, how do we prepare people to be more ready, more prepared to have those conversations, those uncomfortable conversations. And so part of the, you know, outcome of what we're doing with RISE is a very focused and intentional delivery of information, support information for managers and leaders. There's some training that as a matter of fact, we just started this week on unconscious bias. And you know, what I love about that training is it's you know, the title of it is Unconscious Bias, you know, understanding biases to unleash potential. And that's what our, you know, our employees, they want to be the best they can, but you know, there's some things that are limiting us to being our the most authentic self. And so far we've done some training on that this week, and it is being delivered by Franklin Covey. Wonderful training. But you know, again, getting right back to the answer, I think our leader, all the way down from our CEO, our business leaders, you know, other leaders, you know, they're inviting me to their business meetings and saying, Mike, how can we make this work? What do we need to do? And you know, you give them some suggestions, some recommendations, and if you need my support to help facilitate, I am welcome to do so. We have a leadership, a learning and development team. We call it a leadership engagement team, who's part of helping facilitate these discussions. So I think what we have here is a culture where it's not perfect, but you have a culture of leaders who understand what it means to be a leader,
Right.
be courageous, to be bold, to be able to step up and say, we're going to do what's right no matter what.
No, I love that. So much that you just said really resonates with me. So I want to unpack a little bit of thoughts that I'm considering. Unconscious bias, implicit bias. I actually like to refer to it in the positive as conscious inclusion. But I think that that type of training and learning cannot be ever underestimated, because a lot of it is about promoting awareness. We don't know what we don't know. Sometimes we are not even aware that our actions could be landing in negative ways for others. And so I think that the continuation of talking about, those types of things is important. It also helps to normalize the conversation, because right now people are afraid, they're paralyzed to even talk about it. And as you mentioned, one option is not sitting on the sidelines, being quiet. And I also love the fact that Michelin is very intentional about involving all operations of the organization in this conversation. Oftentimes it sits within HR and it can stay there. And I understand why that's an appropriate entry point, but it is about your purchasing in your procurement process. It is about your marketing. It is about your learning and development team and what type of opportunities they're bringing to help develop the staff and employees. And so it has to really be fully infiltrated. So I'm going to go to my next question, then I'm going to open it up. And I want to shift a little bit, because 2020 marks the 30th anniversary of American with Disabilities Act, right? ADA, we all know about that. And it's certainly a powerful resource to have in place in terms of laws that protects the identity and access to public spaces and resources. But I'm certainly keenly aware, and I'm sure you are as well, that more work needs to be done in terms of compliance. Because while the law is out there, are people really following it in a way that allows people that have disabilities to show up at their best? I don't think that's the case. So how does Michelin navigate ADA? And that's the first question. And then a follow-up to that is we have to also consider that ADA includes invisible disabilities. It's hard to detect because people have to be willing to disclose what those disabilities are. And sometimes they don't feel like they have that psychological safety to do so without repercussions. And so again, just talk about how Michelin is navigating the ADA needs of its employees, and what are some best practices that you leverage to ensure people can come forth expressing whatever kind of accommodations they feel like they may need to be successful.
Yeah, I would say, here in a manufacturing environment, it can be difficult at times. Right. Because 2/3 of our organization is in the plants who making tires, and there's limitations that are there. But I certainly, what we've done in navigating this is ensuring that all of our policies are updated with things that are being demanded by the ADA, which is not a problem at all. We're ensuring that many of our whether it's new contracts with organizations who may be building new buildings for us or part of our procurement process, that we apply ensuring that ADA accommodations are being made. But I would say from just navigating the whole arena of that, it has not been a problem, because that's just part of the core element of who we are and what we do with regards to that. To the second part of your question is again, we have organizations such as our BRG Business Resource Group called Capable. And I'm so proud of that group who is really focused on ensuring that they're contributing to the business by ensuring that our policies are applicable. They're contributing to the business by having a conversation with leaders to say, look, we let's not be blind to this opportunity that we need to have for our organization. We're trying to be a company with our employee branding to say and show, look, this is what we're doing with those with disabilities. How can we promote that more? And so it has been, using that organization has been wonderful. Not only do you have, just real simple example from a business standpoint. During the press conference yesterday, we decided that, well, it was asked for us to have sign language press conference. Well, it was part of our BRG who said, hey, we can do this, we can accommodate this, we'll make it happen.
Yeah.
And so just simple things like that that make people recognize it, how they can be included in the business.
Mm-hmm.
It makes a difference. And we're going to make sure that we highlight in our diversity and inclusion report at the end of the year, highlight some of the things that we're doing from that BRG. And we're just looking forward to it. It's going to, a lot of the work that we're doing really shows that we care, kind of to our tagline, we care about giving people a better way forward. And that means everyone. That means really everyone.
I love that. I love that. So you've introduced BRGs. You refer to them as business resource groups. Some of you may know it as employee resource groups. And I'm going to invite Catherine Hall now to unmute herself if she would like, because there's a question in the chat that she's raised, and it certainly goes back to leveraging ERGs and BRGs. Catherine?
Hey, hi, Mike. Thank you for being here.
Yes.
My question was, what was my question?
It's at 11:36 if it helps you find it in the chat.
Oh, okay. So when your leadership team is reaching out to their employees, are they offering any additional resources or access to ERGs where employees will feel more comfortable about having these conversations? And the reason I ask that is because I've been talking to a lot of employees that aren't on a senior leadership level, and they are basically saying that they still don't feel inclusive. Even though their company has put out a statement and are doing X, Y, and Z, they still don't feel comfortable about having these conversations. So are you guys offering anything? Is the leadership team offering anything to their employees that say like, hey, like we're checking in to see how you're doing. By the way, I want to let you know that you have access to X, Y, and Z.
Well, I think one of the things that's very powerful about our BRGs right now, and so let's just particularly talk about the African American Network. And it's been a network that's been around for a number of years, and it's gone through some evolution. And right now, the leadership of that group is doing a phenomenal job. We have what we call chapters within that group. We have the industry chapter to ensure that industry leaders are being connected. We have the sales chapter. The folks who are outselling our product, they have their discussions. And that group, when leaders have reached out, they said, and they have said exactly just that. I mean, as simple as that is, hey, listen, if you're not comfortable, the African American Network, BRG, please reach out. And what we have also done is that leadership team has been very proactive in reaching out to the entire, organization. We have, 11, 12% of our salary population is African American, and we've touched in some form or fashion, or given them the access to that group for those safe conversations. And I talked about those, have those conversations that we were having early on. Well, there were many of those conversations being had with small pockets for that safe conversation. And once we really started leveraging our leaders to have the conversation or giving them the resources of how to do that, then they really started to reach out. And I'll tell a quick story. I had one of our employees in the manufacturing site, she called me and said, Mike, no one is saying nothing. And this is just so frustrating for me. What's going on? And, I talked to one of my fellow colleagues there and said, look, here's an opportunity to engage that African-American female employee in coming up with solutions and having these discussions. And when they did that, it has just blossomed to the point where like, wow, this feels really good. We're connecting with our folks. And that is, I think, part of what giving people access to BRGs and the leaders taking on their responsibility can do. So we're seeing a lot of fruits of these conversations start to take place.
I'm going to bring Danita Price on, invite her to unmute herself and share. She has a great question in the chat. Danita?
Hi, thank you. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. I had two questions, but I'll start with the first one. How will DEI professionals, leaders, and change agents accelerate the DEI outcomes of the organization?
Well, I think that I'm gonna give you a very simple answer in my opinion, but then there's a lot of hard work to come with it. One of the challenges that I think that as I came into the role was to clearly define the strategy and the tactics to execute a DI, program. And we've said a number of things, exposure, talent, pipeline, et cetera, et cetera. But what it really comes down to is how do you draw the parallel from where you are today to get to that ultimate vision and connecting those dots along the way. And I think that is the challenge that exists for professionals in this space, is how do you execute all those elements so that your employees can see and can feel the benefit of diversity and inclusion and how it's bringing added value to the company. And I think that's one of the things that personally that I'm trying to work on to improve, is to make sure that everyone feels like this strategy is bringing something for me. And it has to be around everyone, not just a select group of people.
I love it. Danita, you also had an earlier statement, not question, but statement in the chat room that really resonated with me. And it was when we were talking about how the DEI, the lens of DEI needs to be fully infiltrated throughout the organization and not just relegated to the talent portion. And you mentioned that you believe it should fit within the social responsibility arm of organizations. And so any thoughts on that you would like to contribute to this community?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I am in human resources and have been in human resource generalist and now a strategist. And even in human resources, part of the strategy part, or any strategy, if it's not a part of the organization as a whole, if the organization's strategic imperatives, it sits aside and it's easily deprecated. It's easily seen as this thing over here versus part of the organization's strategy. And thank you, Mike, for mentioning the strategic aspect and strategy a part of it. Leaders, they're focused on the business, but if it's part of the strategic imperative of the organization, and social responsibility absolutely is, especially right now. Anyone that watched the World Economic Forum in Davos, that was the main topic, social responsibility. We're seeing organizations put tons of money, millions and billions of dollars into sustainability, into social responsibility and advocacy, governance and organizational integrity. And I believe that diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging and of the other pieces of that work fits within that social responsibility. It is a social construct as well as a social imperative to the organization, because it impacts not only the organization, but it impacts the communities of which we serve, operate, and work within and around.
I love it. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Let me just share something against it, because I with that, that was perfect. And one of the things that we're doing as part of the RISE initiative, and I know we're getting against time, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. We're good.
One of the initiatives that's come out of our RISE team, and to me, what RISE has done is accelerated our need to improve our quest for diversity and inclusion. And one of the things that we've done is align this with our corporate purpose. Again, we're about sustainable mobility, and what a lot of the stories that were shared was about the inability for people to move about freely. That's how I felt when I was pulled over for nothing, is that I felt like I wasn't able to move about freely. So we actually are creating some strategic partnerships with organizations that are focused on mobility and what we call freedom to move.
Love that. That's awesome. That's social responsibility.
There you go.
You're absolutely right. Excellent work. I'm so happy to hear that. You are on point, and that's exactly what you said. It more concise than I did, but that you're right here with that. Thank you very much. That's exactly what it is.
We're very close to kind of signing a couple deals with some partners.
Yeah.
And I'm so excited. Oh, I want to
I
tell you.
can see it in your face. I can see it in your face when you said it. You lit up. That's what it is. Strategic partnerships. It sits within social responsibility of an organization. In some organizations, it's called something different, but that arm of the organization within supply chain is part of that. Diversity in supply chain, all of that is that. You're on point. You're the star here. So you're the main character, as my daughter would say. So thank you very much.
Absolutely.
No, I love that. That definitely has been a key takeaway from our conversation so far. So we still have some time remaining, and I want to see if Natasha Pauling is willing to unmute and present your question at this time. Is Natasha still with us?
Oh, I'm here.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. First of all, this conversation has been enlightening. And second of all, I'm concerned about those employees or coworkers who may not be the kind. Oh.
Okay. Yes, I can hear you. Mike can't hear you.
Oh. Let's see.
Can you hear now, Mike? Keep talking.
How about now? Can you hear now?
Can y'all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I can hear you.
I can't hear her.
Okay.
Can you hear anything?
Mike, you can hear me, right? Thumbs up if you can hear me.
Oh.
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay,
can you hear me now?
Can you hear Natasha?
No.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so he can't hear you. So Natasha, I apologize. I'm going to ask your question on your behalf, okay?
Great.
Thank you. So Natasha's question is, how do we acknowledge and engage employees who are not minorities where they are, and bring them step by step towards more inclusive action? That's a great question, Natasha.
Thank you. Great
question. And I have full belief that this training on unconscious bias is the first step towards that. It's not the fix to everything, but what we're learning in it is we all believe, I think all of our employees believe in our mission of what as a company. But at the end of the day, it's about what's in your heart. It's about connecting to one another. And much of this training that we're undergoing is about that. It's about, creating those relationships. And, just when you know people more and know them better, you tend to give them a little bit more grace. Yeah. You tend to give them a little bit more, show them a little bit more love. And
absolutely.
And, then it means that we all have the same mission at the end of the day. We may not have the same political views, but we're still human. And so I think that for me, we have to have a very methodical approach to that. And I'm just really right now looking forward to seeing if this training will be able to do that. And it's going to have to be more than just, a PowerPoint deck of slides, right? It has to be the interaction all the way down to the smallest teams, because that's where the work gets done.
I'm not sure if you can hear this part, but my biggest concern has always been the acknowledgement of humanity when it comes to us. A lot of the times, even when you're in a group and someone says something that's untoward and it's about, one of us, many times.
Is there another question, or can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not sure if the rest of the community, can everyone else hear Natasha as she's speaking? Because if not, then okay. So it sounds like others can hear Natasha, right?
Okay.
Natasha, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
I'm just translating for you.
I just want to know, is there a way that we can start people, the ones who are not going to be vocal immediately? Can we start them on the path of maybe kind of acknowledging that something that was said was not correct? Like, just make that eye contact. Don't look away from me and pretend I'm not there. That's one of the things that I've noticed when I've been in workplaces where I was the only minority or one of very few. That my humanity is not acknowledged in many situations. If there's a laugh that's happening, no one's looking in my eyes. If there's something that's difficult that's happening, no one looks at me and shares that moment. And that can be very disheartening, and it can make you feel otherized within the workplace.
Yeah, a really great point.
I feel so excluded.
Okay, I'm sorry.
sorry.
You don't mean to make you feel good. I'm going to, Natasha was so eloquent with expressing her thoughts and sentiments. I'm probably not going to do this justice, but she really was just amplifying the need of greater attention to humanity, you know, especially as we all are coexisting in a space. And sometimes those communities that are underrepresented, or I like to say underestimated, some folks don't know how to necessarily engage them in a way that allows them to feel like they have a sense of belonging. And she gave the example of, you know, for those that aren't willing to be vocal, how can we help them, bring them along the way so that they are able to know what to do in those moments versus, you know, result to actions that causes greater alienation and exclusion.
You know, Nika, one of the things for me, and as we kind of come to a close, it's just been my own personal resolve to make myself more accessible to people.
Yeah.
Just by being kinder, being gentle. You know, you know, I'm a big guy, but being kind of trying to be a gentle giant to let people know that, hey, let's talk, and it's okay, and that's what I really try to, part of what I try to coach individuals to be able to have those conversations. You got to kind of put yourself in a position where, you know, it's not adversarial. It's a, you know, open opportunity to share, speak to people, be polite, you know, just human decency.
Yeah.
And I just think that that's where, and I wish that we could, there's so many things in our world today that are just polarizing things today that makes me sad.
Yeah, you and I both, Mike, you and I both. I have often thought over these past few weeks, when it seems like this has been so up front and center, you know, the systemic racism for so many people, that why can't we just go back to the golden rule and have everybody to follow it with everything that they do every single day? You know, I think that also a part of the solution to getting people to understand how to interact with each other, what's appropriate, what's inappropriate, is we're going to have to be willing to, again, be bold and courageous and have those conversations where we're not just talking in generalities around the actions, but we're being very specific. You know, specificity is so important right now, I believe, because otherwise, if we just tell people you need to be more inclusive, what does that look like exactly? You know, your behavior in this meeting didn't allow everyone to feel like they belong. What does that mean? What did they do specifically so that they'll know not to do that again? And so that's one of the pieces of advice that I've been sharing with others. Someone just put, just be nice. Yes, just be nice. Just be nice.
And what somebody had said before, I thought is so appropriate. I've seen this before. You know, humankind, be both. Be human, be kind.
Yes.
I think
I love that. That is so great, and what a tremendous way to end. And so we are at the top of the hour now. I just want to extend a great level of appreciation to, first and foremost, you, Mike, for generously giving of your time, sharing your story, sharing all of the great things that Michelin is doing to help create an environment and a culture that I think serves as a model for many organizations that are just entering this space of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So thank you for your leadership in that regard. Thank you to each of you. I feel seen, valued, and heard that you each showed up. And that means a lot. We will be back here next week at 11, again, with my special guest host, Jeremiah Dew. For those of you in the upstate, you know him as Jay Dew. Look forward to welcoming him. Thank you to our live Facebook audience that's been joining with us today as well. Wishing you all a wonderful weekend. I want to give you the last remarks, Quinn.
I would say for everyone, just be bold, be courageous, make the world a better place. Absolutely. Make the world a better place, one person at a time. One person at a time. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.